Hi again. We're in the middle of May. Time is flying. The seasons are coming and going, and it's a beautiful day outside. I trust that you're having a great day wherever it is that you are. So, this time of year in the church calendar marks the ascension of Jesus. Ascension. So, as you know, he was crucified, raised, and then about 40 days or so passed, or was it 50? Doesn't matter. And at a certain point, after having visited his disciples a few times and getting them back together and focused once again on their purpose and mission, he is about to leave them. But he won't leave them as orphans, won't abandon them entirely. He says he will send them the Holy Spirit. And as he's about to ascend, he says, just wait until you have been clothed with power from on high. And that's the sermon text for this coming Sunday. And I'm already thinking about how I would craft a sermon and proclaim it. And that's the little phrase that has me captivated and has me wondering, what would it mean to be clothed with power from on high? Now, certainly that means the Holy Spirit. Jesus says that's who he's going to send, and the Holy Spirit will be with them and give them power to do what they need to do. But what does it really look like in everyday life, in everyday terms? So I went to all the books, as I usually do. I even looked in the dictionary for the definition of power. And believe me, there are countless number of people who have written books, who have preached lectures, done lectures, and so forth on the subject of power, and to the point where it can almost be confusing. So every once in a while, I decide, rather than simply plucking something from a book, putting it in my brain for a little bit, shaking it up, and then spitting it out, that I'd actually think about what it means to me. So what it would mean to me to have power from on high, to be clothed with power from on high, reminds me that fundamentally to live life, particularly in my vocation, but I think life in general, you need a power that is from beyond yourself. If you rely solely on your own power to get through the day and think that that will be adequate, you're mistaken. You'll need something beyond. And we proclaim in the Christian faith that there is a power from beyond that assists us in all things. And the more we interact and work with that power, the more effective our lives will be, and generally the happier we will be. It's when we try to take matters into our own hands, often impulsively, and almost like a knee-jerk response, that we get ourselves in trouble. And so Jesus says, wait for this power. So part of receiving power from on high involves waiting actually for that power to come and not immediately reacting and then acting impulsively, because that usually gets us in trouble. And I find that's certainly the case in my own life and my own experience, that often a little bit of waiting allows that power to work better in my life. So we have to sometimes wait for that power to come and wait for the Lord, and the Lord will be available, rather than thinking we need to immediately take things into our own hands. So perhaps maybe today might be a waiting day for you before that power comes. I also think about who those people were that Jesus was talking to. He was talking to his disciples who'd been through a lot with him. They had learned from him, they had watched him, they had succeeded with him, they had taken their lumps with him. Many of them had abandoned Jesus when he was arrested and put on trial and crucified. And now they're gathered together, and Jesus says, it's you motley crew that I have claimed originally, and now am going to clothe with power for you to do this task that I have for you, which is to go out into the world and proclaim and live out the gospel. I like that, because I like the fact that Jesus didn't start with new people who he might have thought were better. He takes the people who have, in a sense, experienced failure. And it's usually through our failures and the mistakes that we make and our willingness to then accept forgiveness or have a new resolve to make things better in the future. Those are the people that God can use the best. So if you have in some way stumbled, fallen, if you think you have failed, if you think maybe all is lost, that's often when God's power can come upon you in the best way. I know that for myself. I won't go into all the gory and laborious details, but I can confess and profess that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you at first seems like the worst thing, because it is then that God can use you and make you new. Because prior to that, you were relying on yourself and you thought maybe you were good enough to do whatever it is you wanted to do. But after failure and after loss, sometimes that's when God will use you the most effectively, as God has done with me. So I would encourage you not to feel as though all is lost. Actually, that might be the first step that God puts you through in your journey into a new life. That's the power from on high. I think about power from on high also, about then once you've taken these steps into this new life that God has for you, as God had for those original disciples, you then have a sense of personal power that you might not have had before. You say, yes, I've been through failure, I've tasted it, I have lost, but I will tell you one thing. I'm going to live this point forward, not so much on the terms of everybody else, but on my terms and on the terms that I think God has for me. I'm going to live out my life with personal power. I'm not going to let people intimidate me the way I let people intimidate me before. I'm going to be purposeful. I'm going to live out what God has called me to do. Because certainly those disciples were going to face a lot of opposition. And the power from on high would get them through. And it would be a power that they had within them to say, I'm sorry, but I would rather go through the difficulty of being in opposition with you than to surrender all of my personal power so that I will please you. I'm going to live out my life now with this new sense of power. That's a power from on high, a power that comes to you after failure, and God has lifted you up into a new day and given you new strength where you say, I'm going to rely on this power rather than surrendering my power to you in order to get through. So those are just a few thoughts that I have that are really more from my own personal experience, and I'm not quoting any particular scholar or author, just referring to that little phrase in the Bible, you will be clothed with power from on high. So just wait for it. Just know that the power from on high that comes from God often comes to those who've been knocked down and feel as though they've lost. God lifts them up and gives them power from on high. And once you start walking into that new life, that power that God has given you will give you the courage and the strength to say, I've been raised by God. I'm now going to live on God's terms and my own, and I'm going to do so courageously and bravely. And that's a power that I think people need in our day. So consider what I've said today. Consider waiting for a little power from on high. God has promised it. And I'll be really happy if you want to share with me sometime about how you have experienced your own power from on high. Until then, have a great day. Have a great couple weeks. We'll be back again. Carolina is faithful, and I try. And we put this together for you. So like us if you'd like, and we'll see you again sometime soon.